Hi, my name is Matt, and welcome to Education Exploration. On this podcast, we explore and learn about people serving in different career industries. The conversations focus on what it takes to reach our pathways and goals to educational and professional success. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Education Exploration. I am incredibly excited today because we have our very first guest on the podcast. He and I have a lot of history together, and so I am incredibly honored to have him as our first guest. And I know that our conversation is going to be in depth and incredibly insightful. So if you would please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, thank you first of all for having me. This is really cool. Obviously, haven't done this at all ever, so I'm really excited to be a part of something that's starting up. My name is Cesar Gonzalez. I am a high school teacher in San Antonio, specifically a high school band director. Yeah, I mean Matt and I have known each other for, I guess, 10 years now, a decade, give or take, maybe a little more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. Right on, Cesar. Appreciate that. So if you can give us a little bit of background, what school, what college did you go to, and kind of what's your background as a music educator?
Well, I started after I graduated high school. I went to a community college in San Antonio, and I started teaching right away. As soon as I graduated, I got right back into going back to my old high school and teaching and just getting started with helping out. Obviously, I was 18 when I was doing that, so it was a huge learning process, but I got started right away. And then after that, I transferred to Texas State in San Marcos. I did that for 4 years. While I was there, I also would go back to, I started at Lee High School in San Antonio. I would drive out here 2 times a week and just help out with the drum line. Specifically, I teach percussion, by the way. So I'm one of the band teachers, but I specify in all things percussion. So it's really easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. There's a lot available out there for a percussion person to go and help at a band program. So that's why I was able to have opportunities pretty quickly because most programs are looking for extra percussion help. So I did that. And then, yeah, I mean, I kept doing it. I probably taught it like 3 or 4 programs while I was in college.
Okay.
And then, got into student teaching. And then I actually student taught at the school where I teach now. So I've been there ever since.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And so I know you have an incredible teaching background. And what I really like about you saying, and for those of y'all that are listening out there to this first episode, Cesar did an incredible job of gaining experience at the same time as you were going to school, right? And so anyone that's looking to get into a career field, I think if you have an opportunity to do that, that's really, I say go for it, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're trying to apply for a job, and yeah, the education matters, right? That piece of paper does, obviously, but the amount of experience that you can get during that time, I think is just as important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So can you kind of describe a little bit about what your college experience was like? I know that Texas State is one of the most probably well-known music schools, at least in the state of Texas, if not nationwide, right? And so if you can kind of just talk to our audience a little bit about what college life was like for you.
College was fun. I admittedly was pretty into myself. I kind of kept to myself a lot. I decided to teach music probably when I was in middle school. So the goal was always at the forefront of every decision that I made and everything. So, I had a good time. I made a lot of friends. I had a lot of really good experiences, but a lot of the time I was really into what I was into honing my craft, not just as an educator, but as a musician, performer. So college for me, probably 75% of the time I was practicing or reading or talking to people about how they were doing something or what they thought of this or that or music theory or music history. To me, my career choice is really, it's not simple, but it's fun to me. It's like playing a game, right? Making music is not, it shouldn't be a chore, right? Like I never felt like in classes, I never felt like there's obviously those classes that you don't feel like you're getting a lot out of, right? Like, I mean, there's a ton of examples, but for those classes that I knew, you can tell when something is necessary. You can tell when things spark your interest, right? So for the most part in classes, I just remember like just enjoying it, just wanting to learn. You know, I didn't really take a lot of notes because I was just overwhelmed with the information and just 100% in that class and in the experience. And I wouldn't like consider myself necessarily like a super applied student either. Like I wouldn't do anything extra or anything like that. But I just had a good time learning in class or asking my professors or my lesson teachers questions. So for me, it just seemed like I just wanted to learn more about what I wanted to learn about. It was that simple to me. Right. So it was never like, wow, this is such a drag, right? I mean, there are some classes. I didn't just take music classes, right? We all have to take other core classes. And I'm really into a lot of other stuff too. So most of those I had a good time learning as well. But there's obviously one class every semester that's a little bit of I don't want to go, but for the most part, I like learning. Even now, I mean, I try to learn something every day. I mean, so college for me was just I was just put in the perfect setting to learn and to expand my knowledge. And like I said before, just hone in on my craft.
No, and that's great. And for the mere fact of you knowing what you wanted to do at such a young age, I mean, there are people out there that spend an entire lifetime and never figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you've taken your passion and you've evolved it into a career. And not everybody can say that. And so that's really admirable. So I'm going to pivot a little bit only because I know you very well. And can you talk a little bit about your summers and your winters during college and what you did during that time?
In my activity, you can call it competitive marching band, right? In Texas band is huge because football is huge, right? So it's a lot different than a lot of other states in that it's extremely competitive. There's a lot of working parts and there's a lot of money involved in band here in Texas. And it's been that way for, since like the 60s, the 50s. I mean, we're based in military band, right? And that just over time mixed with the entertainment part of it at games and such and parades. And then we have what we have today now because of all of that. And aside from that, there are two separate activities. One is called Drum Corps International, and that takes place over the summer. And it is drum corps. It's also related to military, right? That's why it's called that. And it's basically professional marching band. And I know I can't believe I just said that because I used to hate it when people called it that, but it's true. And the only difference, and it's the worst difference, it's hard to compare it to professional sports because professional athletes get paid a lot of money. And the difference is not that Drum Corps International participants get paid a little money, it's that we do the paying. So it's a little silly in that respect. And like I said, it's hard to call it professional marching band because of that. But the level at which the performers are executing what they're being asked to do is, I mean, top notch. I mean, the best musicians, the best performers, the best dancers in the world. I mean, this is an American circuit, but there's groups that come over from Holland and Japan even. And recently, probably the past decade, there's been some more groups from Asia and as well as Latin America. So, I mean, it's huge, right? But the market isn't there to make money out of it, right? Because the audience is so small. It's strictly people who were in band in high school, probably, right? So it's not that many people when you compare it to, the NBA or the NFL. So there's not money to be made there. But so over the summer, so there's an audition process, right? Just like there would be for anything else, just like having an interview or auditioning for a spot in a music program at a college or something. So there's groups spread around all around the country, and they're nonprofit organizations technically. So for instance, in San Antonio, we have a group that's called the Crossmen. So it's basically, it's just like having a team. Like you and I can start a football team right now if we wanted to, right? It's like that. But there's a lot more to it, so there's not that many. I think there's probably like 25 in the upper tier and like 20 in the lower division. There's two divisions. I'm not going to get into the details, but so there's an audition process, and then you get chosen or you get cut. I mean, it's just like trying out for a team in high school. And then if they choose you, you sign a contract. You're officially a member of this organization, and then you have to pay tuition. And that covers everything from, I mean, everything that the group needs to operate throughout the summer. And then you get instruction from some of the best music teachers in the world and in the history of the activity. And that's it. I mean, you set out and you do training for like 3 weeks and you learn an entire routine, an entire show, and you live together. It's basically like, it's kind of like boot camp. It's kind of like moving into, I guess, some sort of like basic training for the military. And you learn a show, and then you take off on a tour around the country, and you see other groups that are, say, if there's a show in, say, like Little Rock, Arkansas, there's like 5 groups that decided to go to that, and then you compete against those other groups, and that's really it. I mean, you get judged, and there's rankings all throughout the summer, so it's really just like any other sport. And it all comes to an end at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indiana, and that's it. It's over, and then you just do it. They just start over the next year. So it's auditions, the training, the tour, auditions, training, tour, and it's been going on since the late '60s, I think, early '70s, give or take, every year until now, right? Obviously, because of what's going on. So I did that for 2 summers while I was in college, and the summer of 2012 and 2013. Two consecutive summers with the Crossmen from San Antonio. And in the winter, it's kind of like a placeholder for a lot of kids don't want to go the entire year without participating in something. It's such a cool experience that along the development of the activity, somebody was like, we got to do something else. I want to keep teaching. I want to keep designing. I want to keep participating. So they developed another organization called WGI, which is Winter Guard International. And this is for percussion and for color guard, the flag things and the rifles. So it's kind of like the placeholder, the time holder, I guess, to those particular instruments or those particular groups of performers so that they can continue to hone their skills and to have a good experience throughout the winter months. And this takes place inside. It takes place on a gym floor with they put like a tarp down on the floor to protect it from all the stuff that's being rolled on there and tossed on there and stuff and dropped. So that happens throughout, like, I guess it's like people usually start in like November practicing, and then the contest season goes from January to April, and that ends in Dayton, Ohio. So I also did that. I marched with a group from Houston for 2 years, and then a group from Austin. And it works the same way. You audition, you get chosen, or you get cut, and then you pay, and then you practice, and then you perform, and you compete, and then that's it. You just do it again. It's just this really fun experience, and it's the same as DCI in that you get taught by a lot of really good, really experienced individuals from a number of different aspects of the activity. I mean, you have somebody that's teaching you how to move your feet. You have somebody that's teaching you how to move your hands. You have somebody that's teaching you what your face should look like. It's pretty much like musical theater, I mean, essentially. So I did that for 3 years, and then I actually teach at one of those groups now. My friends and I started our own group a few years back. So I've been doing that for 4 years as a teacher and as a writer. So it had a huge impact on me, and I just wanted to keep doing it from the other side, being a performer. And now I really enjoy the creative part of it and making it all happen from, behind the scenes and all the administrative stuff. Like it's super fun. But yeah, I mean, and most college students and even high schools, I mean, there's a lot of kids who do it in high school, but most students who are studying music will probably participate in one of those two or both of those activities. It's just how the activities evolved. I mean, it's one of those, like, it's almost like a prerequisite to being a teacher, to even being looked at as it's like they're basically internships. That's what they look like on your scholarships. I mean, on your applications, and I guess scholarships too. But it's a big deal, and obviously there's some groups that are amazing. There's like those top 5, 6, 7 groups that are. It's like being in a top team in another sport. It's at that caliber. I mean, these guys are amazing, right? So.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I fell in love with, I never marched or anything like that, but man, I fell in love with DCI back in the mid 90s, and, just watching recordings when it was on PBS, if you can believe it or not, you could only watch finals on public access TV. And that was the only time you ever saw what was going on. So. Yeah. And today, obviously, with YouTube and all these other outlets and social media, I mean, it's blown up. But so this is a great segue to one of the questions that I did have for you. So what was it like transitioning from, you marched 2 years of drum corps, you marched 3 years of indoor percussion. You now have a music education degree from one of the top music schools in the country. What was that transition like from that experience to moving now into your role as an assistant band director?
Man, for me, honestly, like I don't want to, it's hard to not sound, it's hard to say something like this and not sound like into yourself. But for me,
Right.
it was pretty simple. For me, it was like about the only thing that changed was that I had to start dressing like a teacher, basically. You know, the rest of it is pretty, because I'd spent so much time already in front of younger students and deciding, okay, what do we need to do to achieve this goal, and lesson planning and stuff, that for me it was, I didn't even think about it. You know, I didn't even think about transitioning, or what I would have to change. Like I feel like that might be the bad part about it. I feel like if you think that there's certain things you have to do differently than what you have been, it's probably going to throw a wrench in your machine. You know, that's you trying to do something different just based on the fact that like you went from one day being a student and then you walk the stage and then all of a sudden you're a teacher. Like I think that might be a dangerous thing. You just do what you've been doing, right? If it's been working. And yeah, it was just fun. I guess the two things that changed for sure, the fact that I had to obviously like show up and wear my badge and like dress like a teacher, like I said, that was an obvious thing. Like I had to go buy clothing that would be presentable as a teacher. And it's not every day, obviously, right? Because since we teach marching band outside, we're allowed to dress like coaches in the fall, which is cool, you know,
Mhm.
because we're sweating and greasy and fixing stuff all day. And then we rehearse after school. So it wasn't that much of a difference, but it's definitely there. And the fact that I was getting paid, like those are the only two things that changed. Everything else, it was just, I had already been in charge of a group 100% like by myself before. So it was just like, okay, this is cool. Now I'm just getting paid a lot more money to do what I've already been doing. And yeah, I mean, it was just fun. There was never a moment where I felt like, okay, it's time to take it up a notch. Or I think those are mistakes, you know, when you start thinking way too much about your status, or your new, or how you're being addressed now, from being just Cesar to being Mr. G. That's what they call him. They call him Mr. G. Like thinking too much about that stuff, I think it might turn out to not be what you want it to be. You know, it might bite you in the butt a little bit to think too much about that. I was just concerned with getting better at what I already knew how to do, or what I had already started trying to figure out how to do.
Mhm.
And I just cared about my students, and I had a good time, and I had a plan, and I had a good team, and we just went for it. And that's all I've been doing for 5 years, really. I don't really, you know, I never really saw it wasn't a big change for me at all, really.
That's a great point. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and what I was trying to sort of paint a picture for our audience is that, do you think because you had so much teaching experience that that helped you transition from that college life to the career life?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I always kind of known that. I was lucky that I had opportunities. I was able to fail really early and figure out how to pick up the pieces from what I had broken, right? Like I said, I started teaching, helping, or whatever at 18 years old. And a lot of people don't get the opportunity to teach really until they're student teaching, you know, when they're 21 or something. So it was probably more difficult for me because I was so young, but because I was so young and I was continually figuring out things that worked or didn't work, ultimately I had a slightly easier path in the end because I had experience so early on. I mean, I know students that I went to college with that really didn't teach at all until they were put in front of, you know, that student teaching class period, until they were put in front of a group of kids. And it's probably terrifying, right? Like it's still, I
Mhm.
still get nervous when I go and teach. Like sometimes I go and help out at other schools, where my friends teach or whatever, or I get asked to go and do a clinic with another group or whatever. And I still get nervous
Mhm.
teaching kids I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm 100% like confident, but I'm comfortable in the setting now. So I can't even imagine what it's like to just go to college for 4 years or 5 years. And then at the end, you're supposed to just bring out everything that, you know, you read all your textbooks and have all your notes and stuff, and just all of a sudden figure it out in front of a group of kids. It's nerve wracking. I don't even know how people can handle that. You know, for me, it's kind of like Outliers, right? Like that. Have you ever read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Basically, the whole thing, it just talks about reasons why this person is really good at what they do. I mean, they talk about huge, like influential characters in not only our time, but in history, and how it's not as simple as somebody just being a genius or somebody just being rich by luck. It talks about the things that we don't know about these particular people that got them the opportunity. It's all about opportunities, right? Like I am super lucky to have gotten the opportunities to like I said earlier, fail a bunch before I was able to figure out something that worked.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I'm actually glad that you brought that whole idea of failing, because I know that in my career, I mean, I got started late. You know, I didn't start officially teaching until I was 30 years old. And so I brought a different type of experience, I guess, to the classroom. And it honestly really helped me out a lot. I mean, being able to like speak to life experiences, you know, very similarly to, I'm sure, the way you do today. You know, I mean, like you said, you've been teaching since you're 18 years old. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And so for anyone that is out there listening to this, one, I'll say it's never too late to change careers and get into what you want to do, right? Get into your passion, if you will. But the other piece of that is take advantage of any experiences that you're able to take advantage of. In other words, anything that's kind of thrown at your way, like take it. And if it means you trying to figure it out later, then figure it out later. But I mean, those opportunities are very far and few between. And I feel like what has helped you become so successful is early on in your career, you didn't really say no to any opportunities, right? Is it fair to say that?
Oh yeah, yeah. And looking back, I'm grateful, but a lot of it was I wasn't always in great situations. I mean, you know, and that's I guess failing is one way to put it because that's me, but a lot of the time when you're so young and the opportunities that you have aren't the easiest, right? I mean, and obviously if they're giving an 18, 19-year-old kid the opportunity to teach everything, it's probably in a setting where they need a lot of help, right? And they'll probably take anybody, right? But like you said, I was really passionate about doing it. I was really excited about doing it. And I was just like, I'll do it, you know, I'll do it. And a lot of the times I did it for free, you know, and it sucks. And it kind of sounds cliche, right? It's like, but it's true. A lot of the time at the beginning, it's not fair. Like the things that you have to go through are not fair and they're not easy. But after a while, I mean, things just take time, you know. And yeah, sometimes people take advantage of you, especially being that young and being that you're so excited. They know you're going to show up. They know that you're not going to say no. But it doesn't matter. Like you're not going to be stuck in there forever. You know, use those experiences to get better at what you want to get better at. But definitely don't wait. I mean, I feel like there's nothing scarier than like studying something and then taking a test on it. And like that's what you would be doing if you have this goal and you're doing everything you need to do to prepare, and then you're faced with it right away instead of jumping in and having experiences and failing and growing and learning and jumping on anything that comes up, man, because the other way it's scary. I would never do that.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that. And it is scary, but you know, sometimes you take a chance and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but at least you tried. And that's really what it comes down to sometimes. So cool. So a couple of questions that, you know, I did have for you. So what advice would you give to someone that is looking to get into your particular career field? And you can speak specifically to being a percussion director, or the way I often like to say it too is an assistant band director that's a percussion specialist. And so you can either, you know, think of it that way. But what would you say to somebody that is young right now, just thinking about maybe getting into this profession? What advice would you give them?
I think, and it's a lot of stuff sounds, it's like it would be difficult for somebody to hear it and not react negatively, but you got to be able to play. You have to be able to play your instrument, right? Like I know great teachers that weren't the best musicians, but they tried, man. Like you have to be able to do what you want your kids to do, especially when you're in my field. I'm asking my students to be able to perform something in real time, right? Like with their hands. So it's not like remembering an equation or it's not like remembering the process by which to solve a problem or to get to get to the bottom of a solution or anything like that. I'm not saying those things are easy, but it's like either you can do it right now in front of me with your body, or you can't. So if I want my students to be able to achieve that, I have to be able to explain it the best possible way, the clearest, most concise, most real life way that I can. And the only way to do that is if I can do it the best that I can, right? Like now I probably, after 5 years, I've definitely had students who are better than me, who were able to eventually play something better than I could ever, or even now maybe. But so that's going to happen. Like, I'm not saying that they're only going to be as good as you are, but you definitely have to, I think that's super important to be able to express an instruction to somebody in detail, and the amount of detail that is needed in music, in percussion performance. You got to be able to do it, man. Like, you got to be able to play every single part. If you want them to read better, you have to read good. If you want to understand balance or blend in volumes or how physics work when you're standing behind somebody in front, and how that stuff, you have to get all of that. You have to have done it all. I think that's probably the most important thing. And be yourself. Like, like I said before, like, don't try to be something you think other people want you to be, especially as a teacher. And, it's hard. I admittedly have gotten in, not necessarily trouble, but like, it's taking some time for people to get used to me being me. The kids dig it, right? Because to the kids, it's like they're able to listen to a person who obviously just wants the best for them, obviously just wants them to be their best, obviously cares, obviously, like, I understand that band is not their life. I understand it's just a hobby, right? But I pull it out of them as much as I can. I want them to have a good time. I want them to be as good as they can. If they're not doing everything that's possible within their day-to-day, they're not doing enough. But I would suggest don't try to act or talk like, older than you are or more experienced than you are. Just be who you already are. And most of the time, like, they're going to receive that well because you're not pretending. Like, it's like having a kid who pretends to be interested in what you're talking about, or having a student who always asks questions just so they're asking questions. You know what I'm talking about? Like, those students, it's the same thing. You would be doing that backwards. Like, just be you. Sometimes it takes a little bit for my students' parents to build a good relationship with me, because I don't try to act like I'm older than I am, or I really don't overly try to dress like any different than I do on a normal, because I just want them to see me as a person, right? So many times teachers are seen as like, we're supposed to be like these robots that don't have feelings or desires or fears or hopes, right? But we're people. Like, we're just people. The only thing that makes us different is that piece of paper, right? But your students and your team, your other staff members, and any parents that are involved, your administration, like they'll receive you so much better and understand you so much better over time. It's gonna take time, but if you're not trying to be, don't try. Just be you. I think those two things are super important. Like, those two things are it, really.
Yeah, Cesar. So that was some great advice. And I think it's one of those things where experience and fusing that with education, I mean, that really helps. And I've known you for a very long time, and watching you teach is, honestly, it may sound so cliche, but it's like watching an artist paint. And I say that in all sincerity, because like you said, the fact that you're able to demonstrate certain techniques or, music passages or whatever, you need the kids to be able to do, being able to model that is really important. And that's what I really admire about your teaching style, is that you get in there, you explain it simply, you demonstrate it, and it's like literally in the next rep or maybe two, the kids got it. And I'm like, how do you do that? I mean, it's like you sprinkle like magic fairy dust or something on those kids.
And I think you have to do that with everything too, like without getting too philosophical, but like with whatever you want your students to accomplish, like they got to see you do it. It's like being a parent, basically, right? And I'm by no means at an age where for even my oldest students, that I could be their parent. I would have had to have had them when I was like 10 or 9, right? But like, if I want them to be on time, like, I can never be late, or if I want them to be on time, I can never let them out after the time they were supposed to get out, right? Like, stuff like that. If I want them to keep their space clean, my office needs to be clean. It's not so much that I do it in order to say like, look, I did it, you have to do it too. It's just that like, if they see that, they have to have a reason to believe you, right? And they're not going to believe you unless they understand why you're asking them to do something. And they're not going to understand it unless they see it happening themselves. Like, okay, yeah, I see that when Mr. G is trying to figure something out, he doesn't stop until he figures it out. So I'm going to do the same thing. But if you come in and you don't have a plan, or if you come in and you're kind of just guessing at stuff, or you're like, we can get done early, or you seem like you're just kind of sporadic and you're thinking like that's how they're going to think, right? I mean, if you're not thinking detailed, then neither are they. If you're not thinking big picture, neither are they. Yeah, it's the same. I mean, they're basically doing a version of what you're doing, and that's super important. So like modeling, not just with the performance part of it, but with everything, with everything, like how you approach issues. Like maybe you have an issue with a student, and how you approach finding common ground, and how, like, do you just react? Do you just to the typical like, well, I'm your teacher and you're the student? Like if you do that, they're not going to care about what you have to say, right? If you expect for them to say, between a leader and somebody who's not a leader, for them to be able to figure out their stuff, they have to see you be able to figure out with, say, you and your colleague, or you and your staff member, or you and another student. Everything is, and they're not always going to pick up on it. I'm not saying like all of your students are going to be exactly like you at the end of the day, right? But
right.
The more they have to pick up on those traits that you're asking them to do, it's just like you're just giving them proof. You're giving them proof. And at the end of the day, if they like you, if they're like, yeah, that's a really cool way to approach something or to think about something, then they're going to want to do it. They're going to want to also, if they decide like, I like Mr. G and this is why, it might make them correct some things that they've been maybe not doing their best, whether it's, whatever, practicing, studying, or keeping their room clean at home. Sometimes I make my kids clean their room and send me pictures, stuff like that.
That's awesome. That's such a cool thing to do, right? And you're like, hey, I'm still watching you even though you're at home, right? And it's about teaching them discipline. And interestingly enough, that teaching has evolved into, I mean, here we are, in 2020, and just some of the techniques and strategies and things that you've just been talking about in the last few minutes. I mean, honestly, those were, I don't want to necessarily say unheard of 20, 25 years ago, but it's almost like education has had to evolve with the kids, right? And like the way we learn. And partially, I mean, and I'm even victim of this too, like, social media has just really kind of changed the way we're having to teach the kids today, right? I mean, our kids' attention span, and even as adults, right? It's like so minimal. And it's like, how do you grab somebody's attention long enough to be able to teach them something valuable? And so, yeah, it's so different today.
I think I'm lucky. I think teaching band and teaching athletics, I think we're lucky because, for one, our kids can't really have their phones because they're using their hands. So that, I mean, that's just like a tangible difference between, being a science teacher and being a band teacher, but also the fact that like a lot of kids, like history and math and English and science, but a lot more kids like music and athletics, right? So like we already have kids who want to be there. Most of the kids want to be there. So we have it easy. Like I'm by no means saying this is going to work for a teacher who, who has 6 classes of different levels of math. Like it might not, because you don't get to build that relationship with your students. In a lot of the situations, the kid just comes in, listens, takes the tests, and then moves on the next year. And like, there's no relationship, there's no rapport. So obviously this is tailored to teachers who teach maybe programs where they have the student for more than 1 year, or are able to, interact with parents in a better situation than having a parent-teacher conference because the kid is doing something wrong, right? Like I interact with parents on a weekly basis because they're helping us build something, or they're helping us load something, or they're bringing water or something. So it is different, and we're very lucky with that. Yes, the attention span thing is an issue, but for us, it hasn't changed that much because kids are excited about band, right? It's hard to get a kid excited about another subject a lot of the time. And I know there's kids who, because I loved math and I loved English, but not everybody does. And you can't really do the stuff that I'm talking about all the time with the kids who are just showing up, or the ones that show up once a week or whatever. Like there's a lot of those kind of students too. And, I'm not saying that this is the formula for everything, because unfortunately, it's not. Right. But there's definitely, points to be taken maybe that could be applied in other settings.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. So Awesome. Well, we're almost about ready to wrap up our time today. Again, I appreciate you, being on the first podcast. I know I've said that multiple times, but it truly is an honor to have you as the first guest. So, to kind of end our talk today, if you could just share just some, maybe some inspirational words to our audience members out there that, honestly, I don't know who's going to be listening to this podcast. I mean, it's in the very beginning stages of, being out in the world right now. But if you want to, it's completely up to you. But if you want to focus your thoughts around coming up to the 2020-2021 school year, or just anyone in general that is kind of looking to maybe get into education, or, maybe not sure about what it is that they want to do for a career.
I think it's important, and it's not always easy. I mean, frankly, it's probably really difficult to get into a career that you really love to do, right? We don't all get the opportunity to do that. A lot of us just kind of end up somewhere because maybe we're indecisive, or maybe we just didn't have the means to go to the college we wanted to, or to get the job we wanted to, or whatever, right? I was lucky in that, like I said earlier, I knew that I wanted to teach music. I knew that I wanted to write music really early on. So I never had that battle, right? I never had to decide or ask myself, is that possible? Can I go to, I don't know, TCU above Texas State? For me, that wasn't a possibility, right? And the only reason I was able to go to Texas State is because I got this huge scholarship while I was at SAC. Like things just lined up for me, right? And I know that it's not that simple. And I know that people out there most people don't love their job, right? And that sucks. And there's most of the time there's nothing you can do about that. But if you can find something that fulfills you, go out and do it. I mean, like, if you, just because you have a job maybe that you don't love, it doesn't mean you can't try to find a hobby or something else that you can do on the side, and again, sometimes that might be hard. Sometimes the job that you have may not be the one that you love, but it's the one that takes up all your time because you have a family to support and you have debt or you have whatever, right? I get that. I totally get that. But there needs to be something that you feel like is fulfilling you in a way that maybe that job is not, right? Obviously, like, the point I'm trying to make is, if you can get into a career that you absolutely love doing and it doesn't feel like a job, that is the best thing to do. But that's most of the time not possible. A lot of the time that's not possible for a number of reasons. And if it's not possible, then I would suggest try your best to find something that makes you feel good, something different that makes you feel as if, if you had that job that you loved waking up to every day. For example, the stuff that I teach on the side, the indoor drumline stuff, that's completely volunteer. I don't get paid to do that, right? And I love doing it. Like we're talking about teaching Friday night from 8 p.m. through Sunday at 4 p.m. all weekend for 4 months, right? Like, I don't have a week. I'm 28 years old. I should be going out and hanging out with friends and stuff, and I do, but we choose to do that. I have a 20-member staff, all my age-ish, and we all choose to do that because it's fun and none of us get paid. And that's my thing. But my brother-in-law, and it's weird that I just thought about this. My brother-in-law has worked all his life, with his hands. Like, he's worked construction, he's worked as a carpenter. He's a great guy, but he's always done the things that have been presented to him, right? He only graduated high school, had kids really early on, whatever. But recently, I think last year, probably him and maybe some friends, or maybe he got into it somehow by himself, but he started teaching this like a young football team. And like, just the way, just watching the stuff, is just listening to him when he talks about it and watching all his posts on Facebook, and he's super proud, and he has their logo as his background, and they win stuff. And like, I have never seen him more happy. And he's still working, but he finds the time, and he's very likely not getting paid for this, but he's just coaching these little kids, and like, he has a great freaking time. Like, I feel so happy watching him do that. And then I talked to my sister. I'm like, the stuff that I do every weekend for 4 months for free that you guys are like, you never come and see us. And I'm like, I know, because I'm busy with this. It's the same thing that your husband's doing now. This is why we do it, because it feels so good. And there's so many opportunities like that out there, whether it's I don't know, maybe you like the outdoors, or maybe you want to go be a coach or something, or maybe you want to, I don't know, if you, whatever, there's a ton of stuff that maybe you just haven't found something that's like, wow, like, this is fulfilling in a way that I don't even remember ever experiencing, and I can do it on the side. It's difficult. It's definitely, but I just feel like that's wrong with our society, is that we do things because we have to, not because we want to, So trying to find something like that would be great.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe. Episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow me on social media using the handles @education_explode or @MattEdutech. We'll chat again soon.